I'm the Associate Director of Donor Engagement at Stand, and I'm really happy to be here with all of you on Zoom to have a deep conversation before we take a pause, say thank you, and let ourselves take a little bit of rest from the hard work. So I want to just share a little bit about what we're doing on Zoom for a moment before I pass it over to Todd, who's going to be the formal host of our program. We will be recording our conversation today so that we can share it with others, but we also will have a portion, a question and answer that we don't record because we really want you to participate without any worries about what is filmed or publicized, your privacy, to ask questions and share your curiosity with the group. The Q&A session will happen after our presenters speak, so please stay with us. In the meantime, we love and appreciate seeing your name and where you're joining from in the chat. And also, if you can, turn your cameras on. It's great to see your faces and kind of get that community feeling while we're together. So with that, I will pass it on to Todd Paglia, the Executive Director of Stand.earth, to start off our conversation on doing the impossible, how we win.
Hi, folks. So nice to see you all. Thank you so much for joining us again. I'm Todd Paglia, the Executive Director of Stand.earth. Our theme today is how we do the impossible, how we win. And what we're going to share over the next hour is, or maybe even a little bit less, are sort of little snack-sized bites of what we do. We call them campaign spotlights. And it'll give you a quick sort of hit of like, what we did, what was the challenge, how did we overcome it, and what is the thing that drives our strategy, and how can we just keep doing it again and again over time with different targets, different sectors, corporations, governments, and we hope this gives you some real insight into how we think about campaigning. We're going to also spend a little bit of time having you get a chance to get to know our team. So we have the best team at Stand. I am still here after more than a couple of decades, in part because we have been able to bring together, I think, the greatest collection of digital campaigners, comms people, researchers, analysts, who all work together to make big change happen. And not everybody grows up dreaming of becoming an overworked, underpaid activist. So I wanted you to get a chance to get a little bit of a taste of the three campaigners we have with us today, Amy, Matt, and Rachel. And they'll give you a sense of like how they got here, what led them to Stand, what led them to this work, and what inspires them to take on incredible challenges and win. Amy, would you lead us off?
I sure will. Thank you so much, everyone, for having us here today and for coming. Couldn't be more excited to spend my Thursday afternoon with you all. I'm Amy, she, her, and I'm the Associate Director of Climate Finance here at Stand.earth. And you're thinking, what does that fancy title mean? Well, I will explain it to you in just a minute. But I really wanted to think about what, Todd gave us the prompt to think about what inspires us when things are feeling impossible. And that really was part of this intro for me. And just so everyone knows who hasn't met me before, I'm located in occupied Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho territory in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And what makes me happy and what inspires me is every dollar I take from the fossil fuel industry. And I I think that the person who inspired me to work in climate finance is very proud of me for that. I came up under Bill McKibben and do the math and started my illustrious NGO career over at 350.org. And I learned so much from him and from the organization, but it was his book Oil and Honey that got me deeply invested in climate. And now I have a signed copy of that book with a note to me from my mentor and someone I've always looked up to on my bookshelf. And every time I need a little pick me up or I need inspiration to keep fighting the good fight, I pick it up and I read the note on the inside cover because that was the person that brought me into this. I'm also a co-founder of Stop the Money Pipeline. And then I, through friends and colleagues, Richard Brooks called me one day and said, "Hey, you want to come start a climate finance team with me at Stand.earth?" And I said, "Oh, you bet. Like, absolutely sign me up." I think I said that within the first like 15 seconds of the phone conversation. And he's like, "Don't you want to hear about it?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, of course. But like, I know like this is like the universe brought this to me, brought Stan to me, and brought our values to the movement. And I couldn't be in a better place organizing with better people." And I'll pass it back over to Todd to introduce the next campaigner.
Thanks, Amy. And Matt Jacobson, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Matt Jacobson. I'm calling in from Amherst, Massachusetts. And thinking about how I first got inspired to do this or who inspired me was actually Emerson, Thoreau, and Whitman. In my senior year of high school, we did a block on the Transcendentalists, and I felt like I was coming home. It was the first people at school who had really spoken to me. And I decided that I was going to be a writer and I was going to live in the woods just like those guys. And I went through college, got out of college, hiked the Appalachian Trail, and got a job with the Forest Service out in Oregon in the old growth. And I was ready to pick up my notepad and walk in the forest and write, and found that everywhere I went, they were cutting the forest down all around me. And I found out the hard way that if I was going to be protecting the forest, I was going to need to protect them from the Forest Service instead of for the Forest Service, and got involved in activism, found out that I was a little bit better at that than I was at writing, and been doing it ever since. And that's it for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Rachel, you're up next.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Rachel, she, her also, based in Toronto in Canada. But I actually moved to Canada from the UK around 8 years ago. And I guess, that was kind of the start of this for me, was I truly immersed myself in all of the things that this incredible land has to offer in terms of like getting out into the world, going canoeing, going hiking, slowly, gradually learning to love the cold. But really, it's the work that I was doing when I first moved over, where I truly, to this day, draw so much inspiration. I was involved in a bunch of really hyper local campaigns of people working tirelessly to protect something in their local environment, whether it was a wetland, whether it was stopping a highway, whether it was protecting a species of fish that I had never heard of up to that point. Like the true passion that those people had to work tirelessly in the cold, in the rain, in whatever conditions, against really insurmountable odds. That's so inspiring to me. And I think the fact that we get to do this for work, when those people were just doing it because they care and they love where they live and they love the land and they want to protect it, that inspires me to work harder every day.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. So thanks, Amy. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Rachel. Little quick thing about what inspires me. Many, many things have inspired me over the last couple of decades. A recent call, though, just struck me as I was thinking about this question. One of the things that we do is to try to get coal and gas and other things out of the fashion supply chain, which Rachel's going to talk to you about in a little bit. But we work with people and organizations on the ground where all of our clothes, everything we're wearing, is made. And we had a call recently with an activist from Vietnam. And her name is Con Gai. She is a Goldman Environmental Prize winner. That's kind of one of the kind of Nobel Prize of environmentalism. She won in 2018, and I was at the Goldman Awards to see her receive that prize. She works on coal too. Except for she works on the manufacturing side, and she reached out to us to begin to talk through a partnership with we push the brands. She works on manufacturing. We need those two sides to be working together to move to wind and solar. But the thing that really inspired me about Con is she spent 16 months in jail during the last couple of years where there has been a crackdown on people working on environmental issues in Vietnam. So even setting up the call with us was a risk. She's out of jail now and back doing her activism. She'll be partnering with us in 2025. And people taking that kind of risk to do the right thing, that just fires me up. And anytime I feel like, man, it's too busy, it's too hard, this is too difficult, I think about people like her, and that really keeps me going. So doing the impossible is one of our principles. I think we have a slide where we're going to show you Stan's principles, which are near and dear to me. That's a picture of them right behind me, and you see them on the screen here. These are very unique to Stand. The doing the impossible principle is the one we're focused on today. And this is part of our DNA at Stand, is taking on huge challenges that seem unwinnable, that seem impossible. And when I have people either in the foundation funder community or in the NGO community telling me something can't happen, that starts to get me really excited. It's a particular illness I have, but it's turned out to work pretty well in this line of work. And I'll go back to our very first campaign. Our first campaign as a independent nonprofit, which was to take on Staples and to campaign to get the office supply sector to begin paying attention to the people and places they affect when they buy paper. Staples and we did some calculations when we were looking at taking on Staples. And what we found is that they earned more in one store in 1 week than we did for our whole organization annually. And they had thousands of stores. So I thought, all right, this is perfect. Long story short is we took on Staples and the whole office supply sector. This goes back to the very beginning of our campaign work back in the early 2000s. And turned that company into an environmental champion, where they canceled hundreds of millions of dollars worth of contracts with bad logging companies to give us and our allies the leverage to change practices, to protect places, and to change the way that industry looked at its responsibilities to people and places on the ground. So that was baked into our organization from the beginning. And I think in what you're about to hear, you'll see that that piece of our DNA is very much still intact, where we're taking on huge challenges and pulling off improbable victories. And Amy is going to lead us off.
I am. I am so excited to tell you all about this today, and thank you, Todd. So we're going to get to what is climate finance? What do I do? And why am I here speaking to you today? Well, this last year in 2024 alone, more than 60 institutions with assets totaling more than $500 billion made commitments to divest from fossil fuels. And Stand staff led or participated in many of those campaigns. My favorite campaign this year that I'm so proud to tell you about today is winning a coal divestment legislation bill in Oregon with my very good friends and colleagues at Divest Oregon. And the prompt for this was, what was the impossible challenge? And the impossible challenge here, it was and still is moving any kind of divestment legislation. Divestment legislation is a monumental task in the face of anti-ESG rhetoric that has been permeating American culture over the last few years, and the bureaucracy and sometimes glacial pace of a legislative body, and sometimes asinine rules that different jurisdictions have around how their local government operates. But now Stand staff have participated in or led 2 of the legislative pushes to divest pension funds through legislation. Maine was the first, and that was co-led by my amazing colleague, Cassie Kane, who is also on my team. And the second win is what I'm here to tell you about today. And I've worked with Divest Oregon on this. And the context here is that I help coordinate a network called Climate Safe Pensions Network. And it's 23 different jurisdictions that are running divestment bills or campaigns or, exploratory, whatever they're doing, we support them. And so we have this wonderful wonderful network of organizers. And when I came to this job, Divest Oregon came across my path, and I said, oh man, I can't wait to work with these folks. And I helped cultivate them over the last 3 years. Now they are one of my most successful coalitions. And they started their first try at legislation with a Treasury transparency bill, which they swiftly lost. But transparency has vastly improved with Oregon officials over the years as we have built close relationships through our campaigning. The second try was a full fossil fuel divestment bill, which was also defeated. However, later that year, the Treasurer released a net zero plan for their investments. And while it is not perfect, but it is a massive step in the right direction. And Divest Oregon is working closely with the Treasurer's office to refine and improve the plan to standards that are better aligned with climate safe investing and the timeline in which we have to stop some of the worst effects of climate change. So while both the bills lost, they gained so much more ground with their inside engagement with the pension fund and with the Treasurer's office. So there I was in a strategy meeting with the co-directors of Divest Oregon, and we were kicking around ideas, thinking about what could we run a bill on, what are we doing, how are we planning for this next year. And I suggested a coal divestment bill to the Oregon, folks. And I said, yes, it is incremental change, but it introduces the idea of divestment to the Oregon legislature. And that sets us up for the long game win of full divestment and working with the Treasurer's office on their net zero plan. We all know that coal is a long past dying industry, as Todd just illustrated. And we know that there are better ways to supply energy. So this one should, in theory, be one we can pass. There is a slide, Sharon, on there that has a video, and I just wanted to share that video real quick before I go on and keep explaining and telling the story, so that you all get to see the bill, and also a really cool video that Stand staff produced. So I'll let Sharon share that, and then I'll go on.
Oregon and coal, a story. The Oregon Treasury invests at least $1 billion in coal. That's a lot of money. We usually think of coal as dirty and polluting, so why coal? Well, coal used to be a profitable investment, but now the industry is dying. So smart states are pulling out of coal investments. Look how much money California made by getting out of coal. So what about Oregon? Well, Oregon phased out coal as a power source back in 2016 and got rid of the last coal-powered plant in the state in 2020. But we're still investing in it. It's estimated in the last 8 years, coal investments made Oregon's portfolio underperform by over $340 million. The Coal Act would phase out current investments and stop any new ones. The Coal Act, better investments for our money and our planet. Join others in saying no to coal. Go to Divest Oregon and learn more.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I just wanted to, during this, give you a taste of what we do at work at Stand and share a really cool video that we made for some campaigners so that they could get the word out about the bill that they were supporting. So we know from experience that change doesn't happen overnight, and climate finance is the long game, and being able to strategize for future accomplishments makes for a successful campaign. And so it passed this last spring, the Oregon legislature, and was signed into law by Governor Tina Kotek. It was a huge accomplishment to be a part of this work and know that this is only the third divestment legislation in the country to pass, right behind California and Maine. This divested over $1 billion in coal-related holdings from the state treasury fund, and that brings the movement-wide total to 1,667 institutions, representing more than $40 trillion in assets, and sets a massive precedent for other jurisdictions to replicate this same kind of legislation. So now we wanted to talk a little bit about what made this campaign successful and what we're doing now. So I'm sorry, I lost my place in my notes. I apologize. Now we're excited to support the PAUSE Act with Divest Oregon, which is in the next legislative season. This bill will enact a 5-year moratorium on new PERS investments in private fossil fuel funds. Private equity investments are extremely dangerous as there's no transparency, and they invest in the worst of the worst to turn a profit because they can do it behind a curtain. So on to the next slide. Oh, no, wait, nope, this is the right slide. Just kidding. That last one's my last one. I apologize. I try to read off my notes and talk at the same time. But what we do differently, what did we do? How is my strategy unique? What did we do differently to win this campaign? For us, it's really important to let the grassroots lead and use a reciprocal organizing model. It's important to let communities speak for themselves and build local power. The Climate Safe Pensions Network is that is unique to this work. They are all local folks working on local issues, and we support them in the background. I do that as my job every day. They're a large group of grassroots organizers. They all run local divestment campaigns, and we provide them resources that some of these groups just don't have access to and need to win these campaigns. This is something that Stand does and does really well. That is deep and meaningful support of these campaigners and their local work. We're here for them through the wins and the losses and to make sure that they have access to every resource to make them successful. Research is also our big niche in the movement. Stand is known for its solid data, and data is so incredibly crucial to work in finance, as you can imagine. And then the third thing that we did differently that I think is unique to Stand is that we are allowed to use the money that we raise. If we raise it for a specific thing, we get to use it for the project that we're using it on. And I was able to fund Divest Oregon with earmarked funds from our climate finance department to support their local organizing capacity. This money made it possible for them to have a dedicated paid organizer during the legislative season who knows their local constituency and who we worked with closely. As I sit on the steering committee for Divest Oregon, which is much like a board, and we get to see it in action. So those three things combined made this campaign incredibly successful. And my favorite thing to do is support my campaigners from the background and watch them win in their own communities. There is no greater pride than that feeling. And the world is a better and better place with every divestment commitment. And excitingly, in January, we have a meeting with the new Oregon Treasurer and their new staff to move on divesting Oregon's funds. And Todd gets to come with me to that meeting and got me that meeting. I couldn't be happier that that's the next step on this path of getting to full divestment in Oregon while winning legislation this year. So thank you so much for listening to my story about our win in Oregon and how we supported an amazing grassroots movement. Back to Todd.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. Great stuff. And a couple of things I just want to pull out because they're somewhat atypical of our movement. One is Amy's long-term work in Oregon and the losses that eventually led to a big win. So sometimes it really makes sense to go for something, even if you don't necessarily think you can achieve it, because with the right team, you learn the lessons to then get you to the next thing and the next thing, and then to the big win. So awesome long-term campaigning. I love to see that. And the other piece I would pull out here is that there are things happening in a variety of places that we are doing and helping to guide and putting the research behind it, but you will not see our name. That is very purposeful, not the best way to build a brand, but what we know over time is winning is a lot more important, and our name is not what carries in every single place. That's why we focus on local grassroots groups, First Nations, Indigenous leadership. That's where the power resides, and we want to make sure they are given everything they need to win, and that is our approach pretty much in all of our campaigns. So thanks, Amy. Great stuff. Matt, you are up next.
Excellent. Thank you. So again, my name is Matt Jacobson, and as I said before, I've spent pretty much all of my life since getting out of college protecting the world's forests, mostly working around the areas that I lived in the US and then branching out to Canada, where the main threat to forest is logging for wood products. And when I started working internationally, which happened over the past 10 years, and started working in the tropics, I was really surprised to find that the greatest threat to the forests in the South and the forests in the tropics wasn't logging, it was actually industrial agriculture. And industrial agriculture is responsible for more than 90% of the deforestation and the conversion of other ecosystems in the tropics and other ecosystems in South America. And so I've been working on that with a bunch of different projects. Recently came to Stand, and we were approached by talking about impossible tasks. We were approached by a large funder who'd been working on trying to get the agricultural sector out of destroying forests. And there's already enough land that's already been degraded in South America, land that could be restored and replanted and still have the production of agricultural products without having to destroy more forests. It's just that the model now is based on forest and other ecosystem destruction. And we were approached by this large foundation that had been working on 10 years trying to get the large agricultural traders to move out of destroying forests and move into regenerative agriculture. And their biggest obstacle had been Cargill. Can I get the first slide up? So there are four companies that are responsible for 80% of the trade in industrial agricultural products. There's Archer Daniels Midland, Bunge, Cargill, and Louis Dreyfus. And like I said, they make up about 80% of the trade in food commodities, which is an awful lot of power and an awful lot of money. And one of them, Cargill, is about as large as the other three combined. And Cargill has been the most recalcitrant of all of the different traders. They've gotten the other ones to move to make commitments on not destroying any more forests or converting other ecosystems. But not only would Cargill not move, but they were wrecking the processes and wrecking the agreements that the other ones had made. So after 10 years of work on Cargill and the other companies, this funder asked us if we could come up with a unique strategy to take on Cargill. And one of the biggest obstacles to Cargill, as opposed to the other companies, the industrial agriculture has some great challenges to it because nobody actually buys from them. Nobody buys products from Cargill. You buy products from people who buy products from Cargill. So McDonald's, Walmart, Cisco, these big industrial companies are buying from Cargill, but they don't have their brand name on anything. So they don't have that weakness to consumer pressure that other companies might. Secondly, they're enormous. So, for instance, McDonald's gets all of its eggs from Cargill, and so you can try to get McDonald's to put pressure on Cargill, which other organizations have, which we have, but McDonald's doesn't really have the threat of moving to another supplier because there's not anyone else in the world that can supply them with that many eggs. The other problem is that Cargill is enormous, large, and they're privately owned. They're a family-owned company, the largest privately owned company in the US. About 20 people own 90% of Cargill, so that you can't do the same kind of shareholder motivation, shareholder engagement that you might be able to with another large corporation. So when we were brought in and asked to come up with a new strategy, we took a look at this and we decided to use the fact that they were a privately owned company with a small number of people controlling it, 20 people, to our advantage. We have a philosophy that while corporations can be amoral, that most people are good people who would make the right decision given the option. We knew that the Cargills were enormously wealthy. They had more billionaires than any other family in the world. So we know that their personal wealth wasn't as much of a motivation, but we also knew that they were really distanced from the decision making at the company. And we decided that if there was some way we could reach those people, there might be a chance that we could appeal to their better natures and get them to get more engaged in the company, more involved, and take a personal responsibility for the decisions that Cargill made. So we spent a year taking out full-page ads in the New York Times, in the Minneapolis Star Tribune, and the local newspapers where the Cargill family lives. We brought an indigenous leader from the Amazon to their family office headquarters. And most recently, we built an 11-story mural in Sao Paulo, Brazil, calling on the family to stop the destruction, to engage with Cargill, and to stop destroying the forests of the Munduruku people. We made an 11-story mural in Sao Paulo that was built from the ashes of forests that had been destroyed in order to make way for the plantations for Cargill and the other agricultural traders. And then we made posters handwritten by the Munduruku people in their village in the Amazon, that called on each member of the family to stop the destruction. And I just spent the past month bringing it to the doorsteps of the Cargill and Macmillan family. Again, the hope for this was not that we would antagonize the family, but that we would call them to accountability to make the right decision and do the right thing. And thankfully, we believe that that's what happened. After about a year of our campaigning, the Cargill, their company, had a meeting with some of the members of the family, with the CEO, with intermediaries with our campaign, and announced the commitment to eliminate deforestation and conversion from their supply chains in South America by the end of next year, which is a huge step forward. It's what we were called on to do. It's what was deemed impossible by the other organizations working on the issue, and it was an incredible accomplishment from our organization. We, however, Cargill has a long reputation of making commitments and not keeping them, so we're not stopping now. We think that this is going to be different than the other commitments that Cargill has made because of the engagement of the family, because we have the family looking over their shoulders to make sure that they do the right thing, but we're keeping on the pressure, asking them to keep their promise to stop the destruction. That's what I did at each of our visits recently. We also took out full-page ads in the paper there, and we'll be continuing with that work. We're now looking to branch out to other funders, the funders who took care of us at the beginning, who got us involved in the work. We're so thrilled as a commitment that that's kind of it for the funding from them, but we're looking to raise money from other sources now to keep up the pressure until that commitment is made, until it's as real on the ground as it is in paper. Thanks a lot, and I'm done with that. I look forward to hearing the next one.
Thanks, Matt. So just pulling out a couple of quick things there. One is implementation. Like if you have been paying attention to corporate commitments over the last decade, there have been literally thousands of them. And what we need now is not more commitments. We need them to be implemented. And that is where the Keep the Promise campaign comes in. And Matt and his team have been keeping the pressure on and really walking this line between encouraging the family to get involved, not demonizing them, and allowing them to become the champion. And so far, they're taking those steps. We need them to take more. The other part of this is just from a audacity standpoint. The funder that we're talking about had already put in more than $200 million and failed to move this company in any appreciable way. So for us to take this on and be able within a year and a half to get a commitment from the company and to begin to see implementation, Matt and I are both know there's more work to do, but we're also breathing a sigh of relief because we had about 2 million to work with and 200 million had yielded not much. And so awesome work to Matt and his team. And next up is Rachel.
Thanks so much, Todd. Hi, yes, so I am the lead campaigner for the fossil-free fashion and IT programs at Stand.earth. And I guess if there is a question out there, which there may well be, on what do you mean fashion? Like, why are we working on fashion? As a baseline for you, the global fashion industry is estimated to be responsible for somewhere between 2 and 8% of global emissions. And as a fun little campaign synergy for you, an investigation by Stand a couple of years ago found around 100 brands, global fashion brands, who were sourcing leather, which was linked to deforestation in the Amazon. So the fashion industry is responsible for significant environmental destruction and pollution. And that's because it's really built on fossil fuels, all the way from synthetic fibers themselves, like polyester and nylon, make up around 70% of the clothes that we wear at this point, all the way to coal, increasingly biomass, burned on site in factories, mostly in the global south, for heat, and to the fossil fuel power generation that runs those factories. Again, mostly gas, oil, and some coal in places like Vietnam, pumping out air pollution, pumping out emissions into those communities where the manufacturing is based. And I mean, we've already kind of done the impossible in this campaign. When Stand launched our campaign, no fashion brand had climate commitments that extended to their manufacturing. to put that in context, 99+% of a brand's emissions is in its manufacturing or it's in its supply chain. They were literally out there patting themselves on the back for changing light bulbs in their stores. That's not an exaggeration. So when we ran this campaign that kicked off a flood, ultimately a flood of supply chain commitments from fashion brands, and really changed the way that brands are expected to talk about their emissions and about their climate action. Unfortunately, the fashion industry is also really, really good at marketing. So despite commitments coming thick and fast, fashion brands like Lululemon, cue slides, were not living up to their own hype. They weren't actually taking the kind of action needed to kick fossil fuels out of their supply chains. Things like financing clean energy, replacing coal-fired boilers, funding recycling initiatives, and investing in fossil-free fibers. You had Lululemon here claiming to be human, be well, be planet as part of its basic branding, as part of its brand identity, and claiming to create products which contribute to restoring a healthy planet. And we had questions. So we have been campaigning now for a couple of years on Lululemon, including some really incredible, creative, compelling campaign work. And we're out there doing yoga protests. We were following them at fun runs. We built a network of really dedicated on-the-ground campaigners in Vancouver, where Lululemon's headquarters is based, who were, constantly raising the profile of this campaign and bringing it home to them that what is needed is action and not words. And, this year, we've really upped our game on that. We've made some incredible progress with Lululemon, and they have taken actions. They have started taking actions that kind of begin to kind of move them along this journey. But I think that what we were concerned about was that it wasn't, whether they were really meeting that vision of Be Planet. Were they going far enough? So this year we launched not one, but 2 international regulatory challenges targeting Lululemon, not against the idea that they can be planet, but against the failure to live up to that idea. And boy, did they ever listen. So after more than 500 media stories around the world, here are a couple of my favorites. There was also a copycat class action lawsuit in Florida inspired by this action by somebody who read about it and was genuinely upset at the greenwashing that they had experienced. And then there's also the very real threat as a result of these actions, regulatory actions, of approaching $500 million in fines and damages. We can see that the company is pretty much ready to take real action in terms of concrete support throughout their supply chain. This September, Lululemon published a commitment to power a quarter of its manufacturing with clean energy by 2025. It's not long now. And we're in negotiations for them to release a full transition roadmap in the new year, which spells out not just where they're trying to get to, but how they're going to get there. And I think bigger than this, people kind of say to me, like, why are you so obsessed with Lululemon? It's not just about Lululemon. This campaign has actually changed and continues to change the way that fashion brands approach sustainability and, talk about sustainability. Maybe a little more quietly about what they want to do and a little more loudly about what they're really doing. Todd loves to tell a story about being approached by another brand who said that they didn't want to be Lululemon. And what do they need to do to avoid it? That's huge because we have ideas. So our work turning Lululemon into a champion is still ongoing. Fashion industry really needs champions, by the way, because they are quiet about coming forward with real action. But we're really excited to be building off this momentum to move the industry on from promises onto concrete action within factories and at a national and international policy level as well. And coming up, so we're currently building a really exciting project in Bangladesh, which is one of the biggest manufacturing countries in the world for the fashion industry. And we're doing it alongside partners, alongside workers, brands, and manufacturers, with a goal of ultimately transforming fashion's negative impact into a positive one, which is something that I would have said was impossible, but I'm not so sure anymore.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. And so my favorite thing about this campaign, and there are many things I like about this campaign, but the thing that our movement has been criticized for, and rightfully so, is by trying really hard to be right and being right and still losing. And so at Stand, we really focus not on being right, but on building power so that we can persuade, if not mandate, change by a company or a government. And our collective greenwash complaints against Lululemon, as Rachel mentioned, add up to nearly $500 million of a financial liability that they now must publish in their SEC filings, and that the board and the management are taking into account in how they move forward. We have made clear we will withdraw those complaints if they get on the righteous pathway and spell out what they're doing and how they're doing it and by when. We are in a end of the year run to raise a lot of money and put it to good use in 2025. For us, this is really a huge year given the political changes in the US and the fact that our campaigns can really gain leverage and get wins in political environments where a lot of other things are not possible. So our goal is to drive towards 700,000. My goal is to go further than that. And we really want you all to dig in. And if you like what you hear and what you've supported in for some of you for many years, we want you to give as big as you can. We are trying to get to the end of the year being set up to be able to be audacious and aggressive in 2025. And we want you to really give this thought. I mean, what tends to happen is people get into, I think, a pattern of giving, but the political circumstances have changed. We are ready to go big, and the more you're able to give, the bigger we can go and take on some of the huge challenges that we've taken on for many years now. If you've already given, especially our Impact Collective members who pledged to give for 3 years in a row, we really appreciate it and thank you. And we're going to post, probably the information is going to be put in the chat and sent to you on email and texted and everything else. We want to give you every opportunity you can to give. And to give as big as you think is possible for you at this moment. And we appreciate anything you can do. If you are ready to do so, please do it. If you have questions about anything you've heard or things we have not covered, email Sharon, Sharon at Stand.earth, and she will get you to the right people and get you the answers you need. We're looking forward to a great 2025. Thank you all for helping us over the last couple of years, and we really, really appreciate your partnership, your support, and we love you all. So thank you.